How you
What?
been?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, don't know about you.
Wait, sorry.
Oh,
How do I say your name again?
Wait.
it's Scotty.
I mean, you could call me Scotty, like the character from Star Trek. It's funny. I've had an
Funny.
interesting
That's
history
funny.
with
No, is it? Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know if I can say. Is it Malcolm or Melcium? How do I say that?
What are you talking about?
Your name. Isn't your name
Are you suggesting my real name?
Me- I don't know how to say your name.
Are you suggesting my real name?
You
Yes
don't you
or
use it all the
no?
time? Yes.
No. I did. Yeah, okay. You did mean my real name, right? I was just asking out, Jake.
Sorry. This is a really complicated argument. Okay, sorry. How do I say your actual name?
Actual name, Callum. Calum. Although, even that's
Mel.
not had an interesting history. I mean, I know other people who pronounce it as Calum. I kind of laughed at that, but then again, there's someone I know called Caleb. Even though you could hypothetically pronounce that name as Caleb. So yeah, it's funny how pronunciations go when you think about it.
Say it one more time. Say it one more time. I just want to try to say it.
Cal, that's my name.
McCallum?
Callum.
I don't know. Callum?
Yes.
Your name's Callum? Okay. Is there no M in it? Am I just like delusional or something?
There's an M in it, for crying out loud! You've never heard the name Callum before? Alright, I'm
Okay,
going
so is
to
it
type
Callum
it
or is
out
it
to you.
McCallum? Okay, sorry. So
I
it's
am
not it's not McCallum, it's just Callum?
If it was McCallum, I would have said McCallum! I'm telling you, it's Callum!
All
Okay,
right,
okay.
children,
That's
let's
why
go.
I'm asking. That's why I'm asking you. I'm trying to figure this out. Look, I'm from America, okay? You got to understand. We're kind of stupid, right? So like I'm trying to Okay. I'm the white man.
All Caucasians
Okay.
here.
I'm just trying to figure out how to pronounce it. Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I just call him Scotty.
Yeah, that works as well. I've had an interesting history with names. Basically, when I first started out on YouTube, I started off Scott's Wizard, but then I changed it to Scott's Mode to be more suitable with Lord of the Rings stuff, and then eventually, due to struggle with scrupulosity of stuff like that, changed it to Scott's Nigger. But since then, I've kind of embraced. Okay, tell you what. Keep the Scott Stinker name just to avoid any copyright issues with Lord of the Rings in future promotion. You never know. But also, say that I'm also known as Scott's Meyer, so that I can stand out in that kind of unique way. Meyer being named after the angels of Middle Earth lore. So thanks to X17, I managed to make my peace with that. So. Yeah, I've noticed like whenever I'm playing games online, people will refer to me as like Scott Thinker or Scott or something like that. Like I'm Scotty from Star Trek or something. So yeah, it's kind of funny how that works.
A lot of people will just call me Christian, and they don't even like necessarily think it's religious. They just
It happens.
like
It happens,
they think it's just my actual name. I'm like, I don't know.
I mean, it's funny when that happens, right? When the moment you address yourself online as a certain persona of this name, people start calling you by that name, even long after you're not doing the role. Like I think that kind of thing happened to Robert Downey Jr. at one point. He was having an interview. He's known for playing Tony Stark, but then the interviewee accidentally called him Tony Stark. But Robert Downey Jr. said, "Okay, that's fine. You can call me Tony Stark."
Fair, yeah.
I can't tell you which interview it was, but I heard that was a thing that happens.
I mean, that'd be easy to get confused with. So I mean,
That's fine. You must be educated on these things. Yeah.
we were talking to the guy who played Aragon in like Lord of the Rings. You probably just call him
Viggo
Aragon.
Mortensen.
Well, I mean, I mean, I don't even think he'd be offended, right? He'd probably,
No, he wouldn't be. He wouldn't be. He made that role
or
his
like
own.
Frodo or something. I mean, like you view him as Frodo, like the guy Frodo. Like you're not gonna like actually. Who cares what his actual name is? Right? It's like with Elijah Wood or something like that.
Elijah Wood's done some other roles as well. Obviously, his most well-known one is Frodo Baggins, of course. But over time, it he's done some other roles. He's done the rather overlooked Tron Uprising series. He did that 1-9 thing with Tim Burton. What other roles has he done? I'm trying to think of the more well-known Elijah roles aside from Frodo Baggins. I can't think of anything that comes immediately to. Oh yeah, he was I think that one character from Over the Garden Wall. He has his fair share of voice acting. He was also Spyro the Dragon for a time. Yes. Yeah, true story. True story. No one's gonna respond to that. Hello.
We still here.
Hello?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. You're just thinking all in. All right. Fair enough.
Talking to yourself and no one's listening.
Nope.
No one hears anything, right?
Hey,
Yeah,
Scott, I got a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
What is your favorite book in the Bible?
Oh, that's a very good question. Ooh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't know if I could pick a definitive one. But ooh, I don't know. I could point out some particular things I adore about each individual book. I suppose. I mean, some of the
We got time. Go for it.
go for it. Okay. I suppose I could appreciate the historical accounts in books like, say, Genesis, Exodus, Kings, Acts, Judges, so on and so forth. And other books are made as just well, the Proverbs is just straightforward wisdom, and you can just read like one verse at a time, and you'll get a nugget of wisdom. Just like, wow, that's timeless, and I should really apply that to my life. And books like there's other similar wisdom books like Ecclesiastes, which reminds you you're not in it for this earthly life. You're not guaranteed success at all. More often than not, you're gonna suffer, and you're gonna suffer hard. In fact, that's also what the Book of Job describes in brutal detail all about. And that could be a particularly challenging one for anyone who's believes in sort of naive, whimsical, la-di-da, rainbows kind of outlook on reality. But as all of us here know, that life doesn't play out that way. As Sylvester Stallone said as Rocky, life ain't no sunshine and rainbows. So it can be pretty rough, but to the point where even the most rational people can't make sense of why it's happening. And even the interpretation of who are you to question me? A more deeper introspective look would make you realize that he's got a greater plan that's prioritizing your character above all things. And you have such a comparatively finite mind, as Paul said. We see through a glass dimly. So that's something very important to keep in mind.
Scott, real quick,
Yeah.
speaking about Ecclesiastes,
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna cite a verse in Hebrew. Hevo, Hevolim, Amar, Koilet, Hevo, Hevolim, Hakol, Hevo.
Oh wow!
That's Ecclesiastes 1 2.
Oh
Vanity of
wow!
vanity, says the teacher. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity.
That's the one. Wow, were you
I,
speaking in Hebrew there?
I
That's impressive.
probably butchered it a little bit, but
At least you gave it a go.
yeah. The only one verse I know I could get it pretty spot on is Genesis 1 1.
In the beginning, God
Eres
created the heavens and the earth.
eres
Yeah.
Hashamayim ve'et. I didn't even have to look at that one.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I suppose that's something else. Some books you'll look to like certain Bible verses. I mean, I suppose certain books will really depend on what stage you're in, right, in life, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes you'll need to be humbled into realizing actually life is really harsh. So you'll go to books like Ecclesiastes and the Book of Job. Other times I've been looking into the Book of Galatians, given what I've been through, and as well as things like that, to remind you that it's pretty easy to that once you receive the gospel, you can fall into the trick of trying to go back to works, so a way of um, trying to justify yourself. But that's not how the gospel works. The gospel is a gift that's received, not something that you work for. And that's something I have to be humbled by, even as we speak. So I suppose, in answer to your question, which what's my favorite book of the Bible? I don't know if I could name a definitive one, but I think I can say this with certainty. It really depends on what stage you're at in your walk with Christ and what book you need to pay attention to at a certain points in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. What were you all talking about before I got here? Oh, we got the party
Maybe
rolling.
I actually just came in not too long after you did. Well, yeah,
All
you
right, all
came
right.
in long afterwards.
How
Right, in
cold it
which
was.
case, a
Oh
good thing
yeah,
I
that's
got the place
true.
heated up. I
Yeah,
What
suppose
because I
temperature
left.
is it outside for you right now?
what temperature? I'm not an expert on temperature. I suppose it's winter time, and January is said to be actually colder compared to compared to December. Um, uh, I suppose where I'm at right now, just sitting down, working on several projects that we're kind of multitasking in some ways, and just sitting here at my desk, got this nice, comfortable hoodie on with my pajamas on. Um, the room is reasonably heated up. I mean, it can be pretty bitey cold out there. Um, I suppose the temperature really depends on where are you inside in the warm, snuggling up next to your teddy bear or your potential wife, or are you out in the cold, maybe with a heater or maybe with a refrigerator to try to beat Wim Hof or something.
Yeah, like
It's
what
6.
what degree temperature is it outside for you, or like not what I meant. I didn't.
Oh, right. Oh yeah. That's something else. There's different ways of measuring temperature. With America, they have the Fahrenheit. With in the UK, they measure it by degrees. So how do I describe it? I suppose mathematical measures will have to be taken, right? Um, hold on. Let's see if I can. There's a reliable site called XC Weather, which I find very useful. Hold on a minute. I mean, they might not tell me about the temperature, but it's worth a try. Hang on a minute. Let's see. XC Weather. Let's see. Give me a temperature reading. Temperature. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Right. So up here, it's as of right now, take this with a grain of salt, but it's this is measured by UK numbers. It's 5 degrees outside. But of course, Americans measure that very differently, so the number is going to be drastically higher for American standards if you're measuring it by Fahrenheit.
You said 15 Celsius?
If 50 Celsius, I said 5 degrees Celsius according to UK measurements. I don't know what the American equivalent of that would be. So
41 degrees.
41 degrees. Okay, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. If that is 5 degrees in UK terms, then yes, I think.
I wasn't trying to be a trick question. It was just a straightforward.
Yeah. I know, and I was trying to figure it out because I know how American temperature measuring worked. Because I remember visiting New York during the summer, and then it was pretty odd already. But we looked at the weather forecast. Oh, it's gonna be 100 and something degrees. 100 degrees. We're gonna what? But then they told me no. The measuring degrees is different from the UK to the USA. Oh, okay, right. I mean, New York City is probably the whole. But we imagine.
It's 17 degrees Celsius, and Fahrenheit it's 64 degrees.
64 degrees?
Yeah, 64.
Crap.
Right. I mean, I'm terrible with math, so you'll have to correct me. Yeah.
I know Phil's jealous because he's sitting at the negatives.
Right. I mean, winter can be a pretty funny thing at times. I mean, people associate December with the snow. I mean that does happen, but for some areas of the world, due to like wind trajectory and where the warmth and the cold comes in, there'll be lots of times where the snow didn't come during the time where it was meant to come along in December for the festive season, only for either the snow to come in big droves either the next year or to come in a small element in one area or come in big dollops in an entirely different area. I suppose either way, whether you get snow or not, a good rule of thumb is to look to the mountains. And if the mountains are covered in snow, then chances are it's going to get quite cold, yes.
So I don't know your system very well. It's telling me that my -5 says for you it's like -20.5.
Yeah, we're all terrible with maths here.
I don't know your system, so
right,
it's not
yeah.
It's not nice out.
I suppose I'll have to experience it for yourself. I mean, I live up north, so usually pretty drafty. Now people associate Scotland with the rain, but I've been informed lately that oddly enough, England gets heavier rain than Scotland does. I suppose there's all these things that take into consideration. I suppose there's also the matters of the terrain as well. It's pretty fascinating stuff when you all take into consideration. Something else. That's where.
Oh yeah, so I think I was talking about it. I think you talked about it too. I saw that Lord of the Rings movie in the theater.
Oh yeah, it's become a pop cultural phenomenon again. But let's be honest, gentlemen, it will always be a pop cultural phenomenon because it deserves to be a pop cultural phenomenon. I suppose that's a good discussion given our faith and given the state of the pop culture. And I suppose I've been looking into the history of fantasy. I suppose it's a time to look into things. I mean, if you look up on the internet like fantasy, Christian fantasy, chances are you'll come across two particular names: J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. I mean, nowadays you'll come across a few new contributions like that one guy who's been working on the Wing Feather Saga, and the people at Angel Studios making the Gabriel the Guardians anime series, and a few others if you know where to look. But the two most prominent names would be J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis because they were very prominent at the turn of the century in regards to fictional writing. Now I gotta confess something to you guys. There was a time when I listened to what everyone had to say, and that was great. But there came a point in my life that I went through a very horrible pit of mental spiral due to like relational breakdown. So I tried to fill in that void with listening, trying to have a salvation by works, as it were. It was a living hell. So part of that was like listening to the people online who were like accusing Tolkien and C.S. Lewis of like approving of witchcraft due to their use of the term magic and stuff like that. I kind of took that as face value and sort of spiraled, and I thought, oh, we need to contribute to like fiction and stuff like that. But I spiraled, and it got me to the point where I was almost becoming like full-on iconoclast. But thankfully, people came into my life to actually show me the gospel in its actual context of grace, and to humble me and to realize that relationship is the priority, not getting it right. I wanted answers, but I had to learn relationship first, so that really humbled me. It was after that I came across this Bible verse, and I stand by it to this day. Acts 17, verses 27 to 28. This is where Paul, who was rather distraught by pagan deities being shown about, he got up and he himself studied the pagan cultures prior to what he had to say. And then he does something rather fascinating. He directly quotes the pagan poets themselves. And he's saying, your God, our God, just like yours, in him we live and move and have our being, just as what you said to your gods, we attribute to our God. So what he's doing there is that he's reclaiming what the beauty that the pagans used and brought it back to God. So when you keep that verse in mind and then study Christian history with that verse in mind, the history of the Christian fiction in regards to fantasy contribution actually begins to make more sense. Later on down the line, you have that foundation where, okay, we are allowed to research pagan culture. We are allowed to interact and point out God's beauty in opposing cultures. It is there. I mean, everyone's made in God's image, and it's something you have to realize that like during my mental spiral, I was trying to keep away from anything that was pagan. But Jesus, but Paul himself said, may I take pride in like the glory of the cross itself. He said in one Bible verse. So I have to remember that Jesus took what was a Roman torture device, and which has become the main logo of Christianity. I mean, you use it yourself, Phil, don't you?
Hey, you're right.
Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind. And so with that in mind, it continues to develop from there. So years on down the line, you have that foundation where Paul establishes, hey, we can take what was intended for distortion and actually use the beauty that they make to actually point it back to God. We are allowed to do that. Like, use their own terms to point people back to us. I want you to keep that in mind because it plays a crucial role in how we interpret Tolkien and Lewis in context. So later on down the line in church history, you'll have early Christian legends and the like of saints like taking on dragons and taking on something like I mean, of course, you'll have actual accounts of people doing miracles and stuff like that, which are documented, but other stories would have been these legends and stuff like that that people would have been used to encourage others. Later on down the line, you'd have Luther take a look at Aesop's fables and recognize the moral educational worth in having them, so he decides to promote them. Um, so you'll be familiar with stories like Tortoise and the Hare and stuff like that, or like I think the Fox and the Scorpion. I think that's another Aesop's fable. Stories like that helped spread moral education and keep perpetuating Christian values within the fiction. And so you have that foundation, and then during medieval times, you have these monks who approached these Celtic legends, which were like the very early King Arthur stories. And then the Christian monks reinterpreted those stories to make them into the Arthurian legends as we know it today. Like, for example, one of the major story beats was that Merlin is the son of this fallen angel who like had sex with a human woman. Very much akin to like the Nephilim, if you're familiar with that concept, which I no doubt you will, right?
I never heard that version of the story, but sure.
Right. This is something I've looked into. So okay, I suppose it's great that I'm contributing to this to give you guys all the knowledge, all the history. So basically, Christian monks found that story and thought, okay, that's rather alarming for obvious reasons. And so, for the sake of teaching good morality, they reinterpreted the story to say that the thing happened, but a Christian monk managed to have a blessing on the child so that he wouldn't be corrupted. So the child turns into good. So now Merlin's supernatural powers come from a divine source, not from an evil source. And that's something else to keep in mind when it comes to interpreting fictional characters with supernatural powers. The key phrase is source. What is the source of their powers? I mean, Scripture tells us that the more explicit signs as to what supernatural powers we're allowed to have and what supernatural powers we're not supposed to have. Scripture makes that very clear. We're allowed prophecy, but we're not allowed to do fortune telling and stuff like that. I'm assuming you've read it, so you probably know about it. You have that reinterpretation of the Arthurian legends, and then later on down the line, you would then have the brothers Grimm, who were German and also Lutheran. Something about Luther and the act of reclaiming. That's an interesting common pattern. And the brothers Grimm traveled the German lands to collect all these local fairy tales. All the local fairy tales they could find, and basically compile them to retell. And just exactly like with the Arthurian legends, you'll know that you're aware that there's different versions of these fairy tales, right? The Grimm's fairy tales specifically.
I've heard some different stuff.
Oh yeah. There's some major differences. Yeah.
The old fairy tales were like really dark.
Yeah, they were,
and
very
they made them a little bit
up.
and they were like, let's make them a little bit more like fun and family friendly instead of having to be like a horror story.
Now, here's what's keep in mind: if you thought the Grimm versions were grim, wait until you see the original versions of those stories. They are so messed up. If I'm not mistaken, the original version. Oh, good grief! The original version of the sacred I'm multitasking here, right? The original version of Sleeping Beauty, good grief, basically involved the prince seeing the princess asleep, and then oh my days, having sex with her as she's asleep, and then while she's still asleep has a baby and gives birth while she's still asleep. So yeah, of
Gosh,
course
yeah.
they had to change. Of course they had to change that. Like, why would you do that? Why? Um. So Anyway,
Again, like
that's
I
the
think okay. So going back to some of your points again, like there's a lot of different versions of how people look at things, but like I also can like accept like for example like the Lord of the Rings, right? Like if you don't alter it, it's like a story that's like timeless from like a very long time.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's magic. There is some magic in it, right? And there is some stuff that fantasy, but like it's like it wasn't. It was also designed in different culture and different
Yeah.
reasons. It wasn't like
Yeah.
it wasn't made to be like um some like blasphemous heretical thing. It was just like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
it's its own like contained thing.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
like
That's
I can accept something like that also because
Yeah.
it's like old too
Yeah.
versus like and also compared to like modern day times like it's a little bit different too.
Yeah. And I suppose something to keep in mind, yeah, is that that goes back to Act 17 where Paul used the pagan beauty and said, right, that beauty you have, the terms that you coin it as this, we're putting it back to God. So in modern times, even like with like the as far back as like the Brothers Grimm's contributions, and debatably even further back with like the Arthurian legends, you'll have these like Christian authors, whether it be reinterpreting tales or coming up with some of their own, they'll use the term magic. Of course, magic can be very alarming for a lot of people in Christian circles because magic is affiliated with the occult. The occult, is affiliated with the devil. So it's a form of deception. But when you apply Act 17 logic to the realm of fiction, it's basically Christian authors saying, okay, this good stuff, this good supernatural stuff that you call magic, if you look into the context of the narrative itself thematically, then what you call magic attributed to good, that actually points back to the one true God, the God who is responsible for, supernatural stuff in the first place. So that's something you need to keep in mind when it comes to interpreting these stories, because if you don't have that understanding, you're going to get lost in a mental spiral like I did. Yeah, exactly. So
It's always a complicated thing, but
yeah. So I had to learn that the hard way, and I'm blessing you guys with what I learned so that you can pass it on to others and spread the word. So I'm not even done yet. So I mentioned the Brothers Grimm. They've reinterpreted the tale so that the evil witches would be old Haggard and the bad guys, and they would reinterpret pagan symbols of like fertility rituals and stuff like that, and reorganize them to point to Christian ethics. And they would make them moral tales. They would use any. They would keep terms like magic, but make it clear that there's a good kind of magic, and with the Act 17 logic, you'll say that which you call magic in that fictional context points back to the one true God. Now, I should apply some discernment here because this could be a trap for any new age influencers to say, oh yeah, this could be a good excuse to influence all these kinds of inputs of like magic and stuff like that. But like terms like new age terms of like light magic and dark magic, in sort of spell wishy-washy, secretly culty sense, that's not the same as the description of magic that in context is meant to point back to the miraculous substance of God. Do you understand?
Okay, it's kind of like a little wordy statement. Can you try to rephrase this? I'm not sure I quite understand what you're saying exactly.
Right. So I was trying to say that the new age groups, as well as other similar kind of groups, will have terms like light magic and dark magic, but the way they use it, it's basically an excuse to embrace supernatural systems that are not biblically endorsed. So
Okay,
you ha-
yeah.
so you have to differentiate between that and the fictional usage of magic, which in its context is meant to symbolize God's miraculous supernatural power.
One other aspect that I've learned that's probably like it's kind of like kind of like looking at it from like a bigger picture is that
Yeah.
in like at least most classical storytelling, magic is supposed to be like kind of like a prop that used for storytelling.
Yeah.
Although it's more different now than it was kind of then, but like it had
Yeah.
a purpose. Like
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
something really
Exactly.
it was really powerful. It changed the whole story, and it was like it's almost like
Yeah.
the hand of God. It's so powerful that you can't defeat it or so.
Absolutely.
It's like, but I mean, it's been kind of
Yeah.
twisted to something different now. But I mean, I understand that like in an epic storytelling,
Yeah.
like a Gandalf or something, right? He comes in and he can
Yeah.
like do some super
Yeah.
powerful thing, and
Yeah.
like
Gandalf.
and
Gandalf is a.
it's great storytelling. I don't
Yeah.
think there's no malicious intent. It's just like he's an epic
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can
Just say.
understand something like that.
Yeah. I will get to the theological implications of Middle Earth and Narnia later, but just for the time being, for now, I'll just briefly say that Gandalf is actually an angel, just for the context. But I'll get to that when I get to that. So I mentioned the Brothers Grimm. Um, you get this history of other storytellers that went off from there, and you got other fairy tale influenced people from therein. And then all this eventually builds up to Tolkien and Lewis. Right. So this is now something to keep in mind about Tolkien. He's well remembered not just because he's a fantasy author, but because he's the fantasy author. He's basically invented our modern understanding of fantasy world building today. Like that was a foreign concept back then. He practically invented it, and the funniest part of it is a lot of it mainly was boiled down to sheer boredom. um, well, mainly when he was writing The Hobbit.
Like a true nerd,
Yeah, like a true nerd. Yeah.
He spent 20 years making an elven language. Like
yeah.
like
yes,
that,
yes. So there was a few other authors I forgot to mention. I suppose there were actually earlier examples of world building in some other authors, but not to the degree of Tolkien. Like you'd have like after the Brothers Grimm, if I'm not mistaken, you'd have Jonathan Swift who would make the rather satirical fairy tale of Gulliver's Travels, which has its own unique brand of world building. Then you have Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland. So Wonderland was its own like a bit of world building right there. And then prior to Tolkien and Lewis, I forgot to mention it was George MacDonald. He's a Scottish author, someone very much affiliated with a in the Christian circle, a village that I actually visited. He struggled with the conflict between a kind of universalist kind of value as well as is struggling with God's will for like where people will ultimately end up in regards to heaven or hell. But I suppose that's another story in itself. But the point is, for the sake of this topic, George MacDonald wrote Fantastes, which is about this this man who enters into this amazing world filled with these wondrous fairy characters and all the wonders that are affiliated with that place. And that book was very influential for Tolkien and Lewis. Okay, so now we get to Tolkien and Lewis. Sorry, I knew there was something. It just popped into my head. Yeah.
Just okay. Just give me a couple of minutes. I gotta go take something here real quick, and I'll keep talking to you in a second.
Yeah. Sure.
Give me give me like 2 minutes. I'll be right back. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I suppose
chill here or whatever. Or you can keep talking or whatever you want to do. I'll be back.
Okay, right. I suppose it's still recording. Might as well keep going. Right. So we get to Tolkien and Lewis, and both of them were men who absolutely adored the immersive storytelling associated with all kinds of myths. They spent their lives talking about myths, and I suppose until Phil gets back, I might as well take the time to mention the history of Tolkien and Lewis, respectively. Both of them were raised in Christian environments. Tolkien, of course, was like brought up a Catholic. Lewis was a Protestant, if I'm not mistaken. And both of them had tragedies affiliated with their mums. In that Tolkien had to move out at a fairly young age. And his exposure to the chimney smoke and early industry was what influenced his depiction of Mordor later on. C.S. Lewis spent time like making creative mini gardens with his brother. A mini garden with his brother, and his mother tragically passed away at a young age, and the emotional pain of that experience influenced him to embrace atheism, in the fact that the classic "if God, why evil" question, and through a series of events, the men would undergo education, more or less the same kind of topic, but both of them very much studied myths, but and both of them experienced the horrors of the World War, and Tolkien eventually worked his way up to be a scholar in linguistics, whereas C.S. Lewis studied more into writing, into philosophy, and into the intellectual thinking patterns. And C.S. Lewis eventually got himself exposed to different forms of apologetics from close friends who made him question the capacity to reason, because of and C.S. Lewis documented in his books, like in Surprised by Joy, like he documents the arguments that convinced him that, in which he rather reluctantly started to embrace Christianity. It was a gradual process. It started off with realizing that atheism cannot account for reasoning, because if everything is just mere matter, then that includes our brain processes and what we call consciousness. But if our thinking is reduced to atoms, then how can we trust that what our atoms compiles turns out to be true? C.S. Lewis realized that metaphysics, like logic, morality, etc., and meaning, etc., etc., they cannot be reduced to mere chemical. You can't stretch, grow, or rot logic. Logic is logic. It's timeless, and it exists with or without any kind of materials. It's something you discover. It's not something you invent. Atheism has its roots in nominalism as well as materialism and naturalism. To keep in mind. Hold on a minute. Hard for me to when multitasking. Right. Multitasking. It's hard for me to keep my train of thought while I'm right. C.S. Lewis gradually transitioned to deism, because he realized that metaphysics doesn't make sense with atheism at all. But it made sense with like a deistic god, like a deity who's distant but doesn't get involved in creation. That's because logically, when you analyze the science and you realize that science has its limits, science can't make sense of metaphysics on its own. So questions like how the universe was created, and and how consciousness can come about in the first place can only make sense if you have a conscious agent making other consciousness. So that kind of argumentation gradually led him to embracing deism. But eventually he realized the love of God over time, which gradually made him embrace deism and then Christianity. So, and what helped him make that leap, part of one person who was responsible for C.S. Lewis's conversion was Tolkien. And Tolkien, kind of like the Apostle Paul, going full circle, converted C.S. Lewis via the story patterns of myth and why they're so fascinating. And Tolkien described Christianity as the true myth, the story that has all the patterns, the scope, and the aspirations of myth. Only this time, it's actually true. It's historically reliable. And it's never been refuted. So that's what led C.S. Lewis to become a Christian. So yeah, there's your history lesson right there. So what has that got to do with the writings of Tolkien and Lewis? I suppose I've been speaking for about 2 minutes, but Phil isn't back yet, right? Okay, I might as well keep going. So Tolkien and Lewis would form a club called the Inklings, in which they would gather a few other aspirational individuals. In fact, whilst I'm on that topic, I'm just going to do a quick a search of like the Inklings members, because there's something to keep in mind about the differentiation between different members. Yes. Yes, there were various members there, and they would meet up at Magdalen College, as well as the Eagle and Child pub, which still exists in Oxford to this day. But the four most prominent members were Tolkien, Lewis, Charles Williams, and Owen Barfield. They were literary enthusiasts who valued narrative fiction, and they were encouraging the writing of fantasy. They were looking into the history of fantasy, and they were comparing notes with each other and talking about how they were going to improve and things like that. They would have their criticisms of each other, in that J.R.R. Tolkien was immaculately detailed to the point of often repeating things again. And I think another person, to paraphrase, said, "Oh, not another bloody elf." Whereas C.S. Lewis, as many of us know, was very on the nose when it comes to the Christian themes he mentioned. But also, there were some tensions growing in the group, because contrary to what a lot of people thought, the Inklings did not entirely consist of Christian members. Charles Williams especially was very much influenced by this occultic group, and had very new agey kind of ways, like with poetry from like the likes of W.B. Yeats, if I'm not mistaken, who had like very new age influences into his poetry, which C.S. Lewis liked, but Tolkien advised against immensely. But then basically, what's important to note is that Tolkien and Lewis were basically doing what Paul did all those years ago: take the pagan concepts of like magic and the stuff like that, and reapply the terms symbolically to point back to God. So once you understand that Tolkien and Lewis's stories are theologically foundational, theologically backed up even by Acts 17, then you'll start to see that their stories actually serve a divine purpose into influencing the culture to look into this timeless storytelling that leads back to the Lord. So that's something I've had to learn. There's your full history of Christian fiction right there. I suppose if I'm to add other things, Tolkien and Lewis very much intended for their stories, whether it be through direct allegorical means in the case of C.S. Lewis, or through more nuanced means via J.R.R. Tolkien, both of them, through their different means, intended to get people of all ages to Christ through fiction. Because there's something very unique about the art of storytelling that gets people to think about timeless values without lodging it down your throat. It's very inviting. It's and investing and very engaging. It's a very unique form of evangelism, and that's why storytelling is such a powerful heartbeat to culture. You know, like, people look at people like us and say, "Oh, you're wasting your time with like your card games and all your movies and stuff like that." But what people don't understand is that storytelling is foundational. It's one of the beating. It's like the beating heart of culture. You get what I mean?
Hey, what's up?
Hello, who's joined us? Oh, it's Phil. Phil, you again? Yes. Sorry, your voice sounded very different there.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, I'm back. I just okay. I don't know what you're saying, but okay.
Multitasking. Right. No idea what you say. Okay, well, basically, you can listen back to what I was talking about later because the thing was still recording and I was able to finish off my history lesson. Right.
Oh, that's fine.
Right. So I should also mention in regards to the Inklings group that Tolkien and Lewis were involved in. You know, they were sharing notes back and forth, trying to encourage Christian writing as use the pagan terms to point people back to Christ as the Apostle Paul did all those years ago. And that, in turn, theologically backs up their use of fantasy. So, yeah, that's why I stand by what Tolkien and Lewis did, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they are the two most famous, like Christian fantasy authors.
Absolutely. There's something else I should note because there's like these conspiracies on the internet that I've had to investigate. And it's mainly to do with the fact that not all the Inklings were fully Christian. Like Charles Williams was affiliated with an occultic group, and that's led to people accusing Tolkien and Lewis to being occultists, members of the same occultist group that Charles Williams was in. But the problem with that claim from these legalistic people is that there's no evidence to back it up. There's no papers, no documents, no signatures, or anything like that to imply that Tolkien and Lewis were secretly going to the same group as Charles Williams, because if we have documentation of Charles Williams' name being in the occultic group, we would have documented evidence of Lewis and Tolkien being there too, but they weren't. In fact, we have documented evidence to suggest the opposite, in which Tolkien wrote against Charles Williams and his occultic dabblings and his concern that they were influencing Lewis in a very negative way. So, no, Tolkien and Lewis were not occultists. If they were occultists, don't make big bombastic claims about it. Back it up with evidence. So, yeah, that's something I've had to learn on my own end. Just to clarify that superstition that's going about on the internet in fringe circles. So that's why I had to bring that up. So now, here comes the fun part. The fun part is analyzing the Christian themes of Tolkien and Lewis. And obviously, given the relevancy of the 25th anniversary of the Lord of the Rings movies being re-released into cinemas, I think we should probably mention Tolkien stories first. Judging by the way this conversation has gone, I don't think you guys are as informed about Tolkien as me, so I'm sorry to sound like I'm some narcissist who could like talk on end, but yeah.
I mean, you're clearly the expert here. I don't know that much, so.
Yeah. Okay, so might as well continue to educate. Right. So, in regards to Tolkien's approach to world building, C.S. Lewis was much more allegorical. J.R.R. Tolkien famously wrote that he was very much disliked allegory. Although, if you look into his books, you could say that this presents his experience with the World War and things like that. And you can certainly make a case that it's allegorical to a degree, but that wasn't what Tolkien intended. He was basically applying his own life experiences, his own beliefs interwoven into the narrative, his own Christian beliefs interwoven into the narrative, as well as taking inspiration from the immersive. But essentially in Tolkien's world building, and basically there's a god called Eru Ilúvatar, and in Tolkien's world building, Eru Ilúvatar basically represents the god of Christianity, basically. So basically, the god that you and I worship, basically. And there's the Ainur, which are these higher up angels. There's a whole hierarchy of these different deity beings, but basically the one true god is Eru Ilúvatar, and basically you have the Ainur, the up angels, who make like the and there's also the Valar, and there's these different deities who are instrumental to creating the race of like the hobbits, the men, elves, and dwarves, and eventually Melkor, who is the devil figure, he tries to interrupt Eru Ilúvatar's great song with discord, but Eru Ilúvatar manages to warp the discord so that it actually adds to the harmony. Now, music as a means of creation is a common theme in both the writings of Tolkien and Lewis, which is rather interesting. They must have compared notes with each other in the Inklings group to get to that extent. And so eventually, Melkor basically makes an agent of his own, Sauron, who causes a lot of pain and misery and things like that. And there's more detail I could go into in regards to Silmarillion, which basically accounts for all the history of Middle Earth, including the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings stories. You can get more elaborate details on individual stories with like the likes of Beren and Luthien, which is inspired by his own romance in real life to such an extent that on his tombstone he's named himself and his wife after Beren and Luthien. That's how deep the love goes, gentlemen. And other things worth noting is that later on down the line, actually, the rings were forged for like the different races to have, and then Sauron made his own ring where he poured all of his cruelty and his malice onto to try to take over Middle Earth. And so while Sauron was being defeated, and before Sauron revealed his true colors, he actually appeared in the elvish form, which is of course very symbolic of Satan disguising himself as an angel of light, because elves are very much affiliated with being fair. So then the ring gets lost because the ring was intended to be destroyed, but Isildur got corrupted by the ring and took it for his own, only to lose it, and then it got lost. And then it was picked up again by Gollum, who took it into the mountains, where it twisted and corrupted his mind. It was around about after a vast amount of the history of Middle Earth. Only then do the Maiar come in, Maiar. The Maiar are basically the low-ranking angels, who are basically angels put into this ring's getting heavier, right? Yes, the idea of a burden to carry, just as Christ's cross was a burden to carry, and yet he carried it anyway. So the ring basically represents all evil, and Frodo is carrying it in order to destroy evil once and for all, just as Christ destroyed all evil with the cross. In fact, and I need to look this up. The ring was destroyed. It was just give me a moment. The day that the ring was destroyed, Tolkien chose March 25th as the destruction date of the ring to align with Christian symbolism. the feast of the Annunciation and the day Jesus is believed to have died, reflecting his Catholic faith and the theme of sacrifice in Lord of the Rings. So there's something else to keep in mind. Um, um, and a prominent theme in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the fact that Frodo is the only individual who has the humility to carry the ring to such an extent, because so many others look at that ring and they either refuse the ring as in caution of not being corrupted by its tempting power, or they cave into the ring's influence and try to take it for their own distorted sense of power. But Frodo is the only one who can take it and carry it for so long without that urgency for gaining power. So that's basically why he can do it. So yes, in that way he represents the humility of Christ. I mean, obviously he's not perfect a representation of Christ, because he does fall for the ring's evil in the end. Well, when he reaches Mount Doom, because the pressure just gets so much. He says to Sam, "It's mine." But that in turn leads to another narrative theme in Tolkien's writings.
That's interesting.
The theme of the eucatastrophe. Tolkien's term eucatastrophe refers to like this ultimate turnaround, this great moment of triumph. Essentially, the eucatastrophe refers to when all seems lost, all of a sudden something amazing happens and everything turns out for the better. So I suppose a good example of a eucatastrophe would be like probably Noble Bright. I don't think I've heard that term explicitly. I think this is your chance to give an explanation. All right. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. Basically, yeah. So basically, the eucatastrophe basically refers to like the subturn of events where, when all hope seems lost, suddenly everything becomes well again. This was mainly coined by J.R.R. Tolkien himself in like his essay on fairy tales. You'll notice it in examples like, for example, the prince kissing Sleeping Beauty back to life, and suddenly they're all like happily ever after. You'll see it in like say the kiss that saves Snow White. You'll see it in other examples like the Death Star exploding in Star Wars, like when it looks like it's gonna eliminate the last source of hope. Boom! They managed to defeat their enemies in time. So
that name and phrase, but I don't
the
know what that
eucatastrophe, the ultimate
entirely means.
eucatastrophe in Return of the King. You know, that heart-pounding climax is that
I'm sure I
Frodo
have my own.
caves into
I
the
know, I'm
pressure
not.
of the
I
ring.
mean,
It looks
I
like all
have
seems
like
lost,
ideas
but
what it
then
could be.
Gollum
I don't really know that actually.
indirectly saves the day in that he tries taking the ring for his own.
Well, I mean, I would think
finger, and then finally gets the ring
I would
back.
say
and
like
he's
the
too good.
Gollum
Golden
dances so madly with celebration that he ends up slipping off the edge and falling into the lavas of Mount Doom, thus destroying the ring, thus saving the day. So
Yeah,
this
Go with-
essentially caters back
I was
to
gonna go with
Yeah.
the church.
the supernatural themes of Eru Ilúvatar, turning what was meant for evil and turning it to for good in the end. So yeah, that's and then, yes, exactly. And heroes and villains are they're another theme throughout the Lord of the Rings series, and you've got a lot of prominent heroes propped up in the throughout the entire narrative of Tolkien's world building. There's different forms of heroism. I mean, I've already mentioned like different forms of Christ-like heroism. I suppose the last prominent
Okay, so
Christ-like
would the
figure
Balrog
that I can
know
mention
who
would be
Gandalf
Aragorn,
was?
the king archetype. He's someone who seemed to be in a very dingy kind of position. For Jesus, it was the low-class carpenter. For Aragorn, it's the ranger who goes out hunting with like the long, greasy hair and stuff like that. But through his noble character, yeah, and through his lineage, he actually turns out to be a very important figure to restore hope and someone with healing hands. And he even uses his power and position to relieve people of cursed positions, like the army of the undead. Much like what Jesus did with healing people with his miraculous deeds, as it were. I suppose, of course, there's other examples of like different forms of heroism, which, of course, by default have the Christian virtues interwoven in them. You got Samwise Gamgee, who's the humble servant who is loyal to Frodo to whatever end, and because of that, he rises up to be one of the most courageous heroes in the entire story. You've got Merry and Pippin, who are the most unlikely people you can imagine being heroes, rising up to the challenge to save people when the going gets tough. You have Boromir, who has a sacrificial kind of heroism. You've got Legolas and Gimli, who have a camaraderie heroism. You've got Eowyn, who's aspiring to be with her brothers in the battlefield. She's very compassionate, and her character arc is eventually after that big battle in the Pelennor Fields. She finds herself still yearning for something, but when meeting Faramir, she finally finds her purpose in healing others in the Houses of Healing after being directly healed by Aragorn. And so she lives happily from therein. You have other heroic like Galadriel
The idea of a burden.
being heroic, and the fact that she resists the tempting power of thing and uses her maternal. Of course, you'll have different kinds of villains as well who will represent like for the darkness. I mean, the main source of I suppose that in the Hobbit story, you'll have characters like Smaug, who represent like the addiction of like greed and stuff like that. And this was influenced by Norse stories where individuals would guard treasures for so long they would become these skulking lizard-like creatures, basically becoming dragons over time. So this not only influenced Smaug, but I think this influenced Gollum later on down the line, because if you know that Gollum actually used to be no different from a hobbit himself, named Smeagol. But when he saw the ring, he instantly fell for its tempting power and got corrupted, and it slowly corrupted him into this pathetic creature. And so the ring represents themes of the allure of evil, the addiction of evil, the promise of power, only to leave you in a devastated state later on. You'll see that multiple times throughout the narrative, and that's something I keep repeating. Like there's these different values and these different cautions represented through different events, different characters, different locations, all throughout the history of Middle Earth. So that's why you're going to see people in the Christian circles prop up Tolkien stories, and for good reason. They're excellent stories. Uh, oh yeah. It's mainly because I'd imagine it's mainly because Tolkien's not cramming Christian virtues down your throat. I mean, that's something that we Christians need to learn in regards to how we approach people. Because I remember a time when I was much more compulsive and much more overly eager, shall we say, to like spread the gospel, things like that. But the downside of being so urgent in getting the gospel spread is that it could bring an unintentional hostility to people we're trying to reach out to the point where they'll see you as a madman.
Scott, you would know this term.
Lunatic.
You probably know this term better than someone else. Have you heard the term called like noble bright?
Thoughtful kind of manner, answering when asked and living the example, as it were, then more people are gradually willing to listen.
It's been used to describe Lord of the Rings.
Even if
might have to look it up.
It doesn't ultimately influence it. The fact that you make them
because
fake,
basically
really
the idea I think is like kind of like that.
And
well, it's like you have like these dark circumstances, but like they always find a way to overcome it, kind of. Like
but of course, there's a time and place for stuff like the Narnia stories.
A noble
they've
manner,
been
like
instrumental in
Gondor, like they were fallen,
well.
but they kind of get back
you have
up.
To remember that C.S. Lewis delved a lot more explicitly into the realm of apologetics than J.R.R. Tolkien did, which is strange because Tolkien actually used myth to the compelling immersion of myth as a way of convincing C.S. Lewis that Christianity is the true myth. That all our aspirations, all our virtues that we tell in these stories point back to Christ. So C.S. Lewis is repeating likewise, and he's applying the apologetics that he's learned in like his autobiographies and stuff like that. And much of C.S. Lewis's argumentations are C.S. Lewis pretty much modernized a lot of these argumentations that we still use to this day in regards to the realm of apologetics. And that's why even like prominent modern figures of politics will still refer to C.S. Lewis to this day. But of course, you'll have more classical apologists like go as far back as like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas and so on and so forth. But in regards to C.S. Lewis, there have been people who managed to convert to Christianity because they were moved by the stories of that C.S. Lewis wrote. Of course, the Narnia series doesn't really need as much as an in-depth explanation because although it's kind of funny how The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Aslan was not originally intended to be such a direct Jesus figure. That was kind of just interwoven into the story as it was. It wasn't until later when he received the feedback. He just thought,
I think it also symbolizes the idea of heroes and villains, and that villains are always going to fail and die. They'll be punished, and the heroes are always the heroes are always going to win.
So yeah, it's no secret that Aslan represents Jesus, and that the White Witch basically is a Satan figure. And there's other evil figures throughout the Narnia narrative, like the ape in the last battle represents the Antichrist, someone posing as well, actually the ape uses this unwilling donkey with a lion skin on his head to try to prop himself. I suppose the different people who enter Narnia can certainly represent the people who go through their different phases and the different aspects of the journey. I mean, it's as much a story about growing up as much as it is direct Christian allegory. There can be a surprising nuance in C.S. Lewis's stories. Like, for example, the professor in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, who is actually the main protagonist of The Magician's Nephew, he provides a very interesting in-world apologetics in favor of Lucy when she's convinced that what she saw was actually real. The professor said that if Lucy's not known to tell lies so frivolously, then she logically must be telling the truth, no matter how bizarre her claims are. So that's an interesting in-story form of apologetics, I find. And fun fact, the professor character is based off C.S. Lewis, and Treebeard was based off of C.S. Lewis, so there's a fun fact for you. Did you know that? The Ent. There you go. There you go. There you have it. um, and other things worth noting about C.S. Lewis's story. There can be various aspirational kind of stories, and in regards to themes of getting closer to Christ and getting to know him more and more. In fact, the last chapter of the last battle has to be one of the most beautiful passages I've ever read. It basically describes heaven and just the notion of going further up, further in, and getting to know such a glory and a celebration of peace that's just too wonderful for these pages to describe. And Elijah is going, wow, just wow. I mean, everyone knows C.S. Lewis for his Narnia stories, but he's also made his own science fiction stories. Tolkien and Lewis dared themselves to have a science fiction challenge. Tolkien didn't quite succeed because science fiction wasn't really quite his forte. But in comparison, C.S. Lewis seemed to excel quite well with science fiction. He made the Out of the Silent Planet trilogy. It was, his space trilogy. And it was in this science fiction trilogy where C.S. Lewis made some science fiction based speculations on theology. Like, for example, what is, if alien, organic sentient beings actually do exist, what does that mean theologically? C.S. Lewis imagined some scenarios where aliens would have their own versions of the Adam and Eve story, where some planets would be in a non-fallen state, and other planets would be in a fallen state and need the redemption of Christ. So that was an interesting theological thing he tackled there in regards to science fiction. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I really appreciate C.S. Lewis's contribution to fiction. I could read that last passage of the last battle all day, but in all honesty, my favorite fictional story that C.S. Lewis ever wrote would probably have to be the Screwtape Letters. Have you ever heard of that? All right, the Screwtape Letters. It's essentially the Screwtape Letters is basically
to me, it feels like Tolkien
interesting
the storytelling
form of
it
satire.
almost feels superior to the Chronicles of Narnia.
Satire about demons.
The Narnia's got overshadowed, and Tolkien's massively prominent.
Of the Screwtape Letters is that the titular senior demon, Screwtape, is writing some advice to a junior demon named Wormwood on how to tempt a human being to get him to hell. And the story basically, in the first chapter, it's just any other man from C.S. Lewis's time period. But in the second letter, Screwtape reveals to Wormwood that he's shocked to find out that this patient, as they call him, has become a Christian. So the book itself mainly consists of 31 different letters. So for number 2 onwards, Screwtape is trying to give Wormwood advice on how to tempt a Christian to basically get to hell. C.S. Lewis was quite uncomfortable when he wrote it, and he intended it to be a gift for Tolkien, but Tolkien didn't really like it that much. It's a rather profound story, because C.S. Lewis has these rather profound moral insights in regards to the nature of good and evil, and how easy it can be for us to slip into certain traps. Like Screwtape says that the best road to hell is the one with no road signs, no signposts, just the gradual slope. He accidentally turns himself into a giant centipede. As he's writing the letter, mind you, to the point where he has to get a scribe to do it for him because he can't finish it just because he's so angry. In the letter afterwards, there's a rather interesting concept where Screwtape is still ticked off about this Christian lover, but he's come up with some rather devious ideas as to how to persuade him in a different sense. He gets into discussions about politics, and Screwtape has some very interesting things to say about how Christians can use theology as a means to an end just for political validation rather than for stating what's true. Whereas that wasn't really the point. And that's something to keep in mind. This doesn't just apply to particular sides you could be thinking of. This applies to all politics, mind you. It can be very easy for Christians of any kind to like slip into that trap of using certain coined terms of theology and things like that just as a means to justify themselves, even if what they have to say contradicts what's true. In fact, Screwtape says it himself at the end of that particular letter where he says, "Do you see the little rift? Believe this not because it is true, but for some other reason." Like, that's pretty devious stuff, and it's very insightful that C.S. Lewis wrote that. So, obviously, I mentioned the history of Christian fantasy and how Tolkien and Lewis have been foundational to basically getting Christian virtue into fantasy and sci-fi as we know it today. In Christian circles, you'll see some continuations of this kind of Christian storytelling with the likes of the Wingfeather saga and a children's bedtime story or two, or sometimes with the occasional like superhero story, whether it's influenced by Tolkien and Lewis directly or not, I suppose. And I suppose whilst it's on my mind, not only have there been people who have been positively influenced by Tolkien and Lewis, but there's also been various authors who have gone out of their way to try to subvert Tolkien and Lewis in many regards. He's basically made his entire story trilogy based on that, as well as his other writings. It's not so explicit in the Northern Lights story, although it is pretty much overtly hinting at that in other ways. But in his other books, the Amber Spyglass and the Subtle Knife, he basically has the protagonist Lyra go on this world-hopping journey
Treebeard?
to essentially, which eventually culminates in the characters going against a Christian organization and basically facing off and eventually killing Philip Pullman's made-up version of God, which is basically a retarded, tired old angel, which, if you ask me, sounds more like Satan than it does God. If you're being actually consistent, but in Philip Pullman's mind, this is meant to represent God, and how we don't need a God to define meaning and things like that. We can form our own meaning, and he's trying to say, that the transition from innocence to insight is such a beautiful thing. It's a kind of story where you could say, okay, Philip Pullman, I get what you're trying to say in regards to possibly like a transition to understanding, but at the same time, really? I mean, if Nietzsche were to read his writings, he would slap him in the face if he met him in person. Because Nietzsche was also an atheist, but Nietzsche was horrified at the notion of getting rid of God, not celebratory about it. But Philip Pullman doesn't really care. He just wants to be his own authority. He wants people to govern their own lives. And he made that explicitly clear. Oh boy, do I have to bring this up? Okay, I guess so. Okay, here we go. Oh boy. Okay, brace yourselves, gentlemen. You need to sit down for this one bit I need to describe. It is so stupid. Okay, right. So there's this one part in the book where there's this one character who used to be a nun, right? But then she transitioned to being like a scientist character. There's a scene where Lyra meets this character. Oh my days, she's enjoying like eating marzipan and under the sun, and I could be misinterpreting this, but from what I understand, as she has this, oh my days, just say it, Cam, just say it. As she's eating marzipan and enjoying the sun, she realizes, because marzipan tastes so good and the sun feels good on my skin, therefore there is no God. Oh my, really? Really? That's what convinced the character to turn to secularism? Really? Really? Are you serious? That's the way it's formulated. Oh my days, it's so
Don't know.
stupid.
I don't know if I heard that.
By that kind of reasoning can be used to defend God's existence because, God gave you access to these delights. How does that defend any worldview at all? Like that's the kind of lows Philip Pullman will reach just for his romanticism. It's so stupid. All right. Thank you for joining us. All right. See ya. Right. Right. So basically, Philip Pullman tries to have this very romanticized look of like atheism, but it's really his way of saying, I want to be the boss of everything. But his romanticism is basically a way of denying the obvious, in that atheism is very bleak. Like, it reduces all of existence to just meaningless filth and junk. But of course, C.S. Lewis managed to refute atheism by saying that atheism can't even make sense of metaphysics. So how can we even trust it from its foundational roots? There's Philip trying to subvert C.S. Lewis. I suppose I should end off this session by mentioning George R. Martin. But Martin, unlike Philip Pullman, he actually has a lot more respect for Tolkien than what Philip Pullman has for C.S. Lewis. Keep in mind. Martin does spend a lot of his time trying to subvert what Tolkien established, but at the same time, Martin does have a lot of respect for Tolkien in regards to what Tolkien had established in regards to bringing about the concept of fantasy world building. So George R. R. Martin is a professing agnostic, from what I understand, basically a secularist, he wanted to make his own adult fantasy stories, which basically remove any trace of romanticism and just get straight to the brutal reality of or in his ideas. His world building focuses a lot on like medieval brutalism, pretty much in an excessive manner. I mean, there's a lot of people who say, okay, look, George R. R. Martin, you're pretty much exaggerating what medieval times used to be like, but at the same time, I can understand what George R. Martin's doing. He's basically removing any trace of romanticism and saying, "This is what would happen if we lived in a dark, depressing kind of world." Um, I suppose because we're talking theology, George R. R. Martin says that in life, people's uh, sense of like related to like gods and stuff like that is pretty ambiguous, pretty vague in George R. R. Martin's eyes. Um, so he thought, why not bring that ambiguity into my stories? He thinks so. So in George R. R. Martin's world building, it's rather ambiguous as to whether all these different gods, these eldritch gods, even exist or not. The way he presents his stories is that it's ambiguous as to whether these gods exist or not, and even if they do exist, they're very distant to even care about the suffering of what the characters are going through. That's basically the kind of dark fantasy world building he's going for. But at the same time, there's still like this magic and all these witches and stuff like that. I suppose George R. R. Martin's like Westeros and stuff like that. It would pretty much be like Europe if it wasn't influenced by Christianity, if you ask me, which is quite interesting. And I suppose here, George R. R. Martin is removing any kind of romanticism, even towards anything for secularism. Like George R. R. Martin is, in many respects, is actually being consistent with the brutality of a nihilistic world. He's being consistent in the fact that if any kind of nihilism were to be taken consistently, it would lead to such an existential despair, and that would brood over the character's well-being, and that's why you see it sort of leak out with what the characters say and what they believe and how they treat life in such a hedonistic kind of manner, and all these other different behaviors and things like that. People can often say, Callum, you're analyzing stories too much, but here's the thing, like theology informs everything. How can I not interpret stories from a spiritual basis? Uh,
I've heard of the Martin
Hello.
guy. Okay. Yeah, I don't know who that guy is. Maybe I've heard of him though.
Yeah,
A good name, by the way.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
I've heard of that.
That's why.
I think
Absolutely,
I've read
well
or
written.
watched the
People
movies
just,
too. Yeah.
regardless of belief, people just latch onto well written stories. Exactly. And Tolkien's been inspirational for a lot of fantasy out there. He's been inspired for like Jim Henson's like The Dark Crystal movie. To an extent, he's been inspirational for some of Hayao Miyazaki's movies, like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Um, Although Hayao Miyazaki has criticized like the fixation on battle in the Peter Jackson's movies, and attributing that to Tolkien's writings. But a friend of mine, Malika writes, made a video addressing that critique, and I've also made a video on my channel addressing what Miyazaki had to say to Tolkien and pointing out actually the two of them have quite a lot in common in regards to their themes and stuff like that. It's just that Miyazaki has just more like meditative, peaceful, pacifist values compared to Tolkien. So that's just something in regards to like how different authors will approach different kinds of storytelling. Um, yeah, Yeah. He had medieval romanticism in regards to his writing, and something you have to remember is that Tolkien, as well as
Oh yeah, I've
other
heard of
authors
that
like
before.
A. A. Milne and C.S.
Like
Lewis,
daemons or something like that.
they served in the terrible warfare, and so
They
they
used that in
used
like
their
Avatar,
stories.
right?
Not just to inspire others, but also as a partial way of escapism. Like
I
when
don't
you're
know.
in the ditches and you're calling out for in
The
the midst
blue,
of like
like,
despair,
and
like
not
you'd
the
want to have
Airbender,
a
but
little
the
bit of
other
a
Avatar.
release,
Yeah.
wouldn't you? Yeah, you would like so
Yeah.
absolutely. So I mean, romanticism does have it's embellished by the very nature of its form of storytelling. But I suppose in the right kind of context, it can serve as a healthy reminder of what it is we're fighting for in the first place. And I suppose removing romanticism also has its time and place for reminding us of not to get too attached to this reality as it exists now. So I suppose there's different advantages to the to those kinds of storytelling, I guess. I'm very happy that I can honestly spread this knowledge to more people so they can understand the nuance, the theology, and the history. Because some of this I had to learn the hard way via mental health spirals and people having to come into my life to remind me that relationship is ultimately at the center point of life, and relationship is life's greatest adventure. So I had to be humbled in that way before coming across the answers that I'm telling you now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Creative juices. Yeah. You gotta love those creative juices. Yeah. Ah. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly. All these little things you'll have to take into consideration. It really depends on the scope of your project. If it's just a fun, quick thing, then you're probably not going to go into as much detail as you would say making your own book series or game series or whatever it is. Something more that's going to be for like a more kind of audience. I suppose it really depends on what format you're going to present it in. I suppose. Right. All right, right. I'd probably advise meeting some kind of literary agent, or at the very least, like looking into writing advice because um, My friend Malika writes. Her name's Malika Gandhi. She herself has worked in that kind of business with writing, and she's had to humble me in realizing, look, you can have all the elaborate world building that you can get, but you need to get people invested in your characters. You need to get people to care about the characters being invested in.
I don't.
You need to have emotional attachment to them. It can be a pretty easy trap for people to slip into like this kind of escapism, but actually end up being afraid of letting go of
Hey guys,
their
I
world
gotta
building.
get
But
going for
Malika's
right
told
now.
me that when you're world building,
I'll
you are
talk to you.
psychologically going through the
Not
Okay,
process
Ace.
of raising
Ace.
your own child.
You're gonna be there
Raising
tomorrow,
it,
right?
teaching
You gonna
it,
be there for
feeding it,
my
nourishing
session
it,
tomorrow?
and eventually the
Yeah,
time's
I'll be
going to
there
come
tomorrow.
when the child, the story,
Okay.
comes to the
Right.
right kind of
Peace
age,
out.
You have
and
any
you have
you have
to
any
let
Oh, okay.
that
See ya.
story go. Like harsh words, but they need to be said. They need to humble you because this isn't just some fun thing. You need to get people invested in the characters. You need to get people to care. That's what Malika taught me. Malika's been very humbling in regards to uh, laying like the emotional foundation for like different characters. You should look up her channel, Malika Writes. She also delves more explicitly into themes about masculinity and femininity, as well as delving more into J.R.R. Tolkien's writings and also on occasion like C.S. Lewis's writings. So you should probably look into her channel. Yeah, yeah. Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. Of course. Yeah, of course. You commented. That's right. Yes. Yeah, yeah. It, publishing to the public. That's what I meant. Exactly, exactly. Because you've had the control of the story this whole time, but eventually you have to release it to the public for their own for them to interpret it. And not only do you have to uh, be prepare yourself for the criticism that you receive, but as I've learned later, there's also a term that people bring up called like the death of the author, um, which basically correlates with how people have the chance of interpreting your story in a way that's completely different from what you intended it to be interpreted as. Like, yeah, yeah, yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that's something you need to just keep in mind, because yes, exactly, exactly. That is one of the hardest things you're going to have to learn. The fact that you're not in control of everything, and this is actually what leads to mental freedom. It's learning that you're not in direct control of everything. Uh, but that's scary because that involves embracing uncertainty. Yeah, it is. Uh, Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, that can be a harsh inner critic that's not going to lead us anywhere. It's just going to lead us to more torment and things like that. So often at times you have to realize that doubt, fear, anxiety, that's not God talking. It might feel like something authoritative thing talking, but it's not. Like I remember when during that mental spiral I mentioned, I remember there was one time when I was like playing a game, and I heard this harsh voice like, "You need to get this right, or else something bad is going to happen." Now, looking back now, that's complete utter nonsense. But the voice seemed rather intimidating, so I tried to do it, but it just led to a kind of a breakdown. You have to realize that God is not speaking to you in your like anxiety and things
this
like
last
that.
part you've been talking about is actually really interesting.
God is encouraging you. He is
gosh.
trying to build
Okay.
you up.
Okay.
He will discipline you, but
You
he's
said a lot of
disciplining you
stuff.
for the better,
I'm probably
in
gonna
a
have to go
better
back and
position.
rewatch this, to be
He's
honest.
always building you up. And he's trying
But,
to bring you out of darkness and
okay, what
into
was I
the
gonna try to
light
say?
of his grace. And I tell you this, Phil.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're talking
looking
about like
back
you know
now,
like,
film a
the
journey,
different authors and how they want
the parts
to
that have overwhelmed me the
like how
most
what they're trying to get
about
across,
God,
and there's like
it's
the way
not
that they story tell.
how angry he can get. It's how merciful
And like
he
you know,
can
I think
get.
because I think some of these authors are so like people really like what they make, because
Find
they
his mercy.
because they
to be
kind of
like,
because they don't hold back. They go all in what they do. And I think that makes some of them interesting. Like George Martin,
I
he
suppose,
goes all
it's
in on
very
what
similar to
he
that.
believes. I mean, so I
But
think
I
people
suppose
kind of like
in regards to
they kind of
my
see
mental
this and it's
health
like
journey,
you know
it's more
they don't always
applied to
agree
myself. Like
necessarily with everything, but it's like
when I was
it's
expecting
pretty it's well
something
made
bad
too.
to happen to me, or like I was expecting
Also well written.
something that I needed to further discipline with. It was God saying, "No, you need to rest. You need to embrace relationship." Now, here's the thing: like I am a mildly autistic man. So my very nature makes me not the best socially, to bluntly put it. It's not that I can't be sociable. I mean, I'm talking to you guys right now, obviously, and I've made like entire live streams, like laughing and back and forth with my audience and stuff like that. But I'm gonna be honest. I'm not really the best socially. I'm not. I'm still learning that to this day. As a man, I'm prone to behaviors of trying to prove myself for worth and value. When autism's put into there, that amplifies the need for certainty and
I did find that one thing you said about the idea of like
as it
romanticism,
were.
I guess for like was it like for
So
Tolkien? So Tolkien
the
was pretty
breakthrough
romantic,
for
not
mental
romantic,
clarity
romanticism
is
based when he like do a lot of his writing.
I've had people come into my life who have been very foundational to helping me open up relationally, and this in turn is going to influence your the fiction that you write, because if you find out that relationship is at the center point of all reality, it's going to transform the way you write your characters, the way they grow, and through that period of growth, you're going to look back on your trials and your tribulations and also apply that
I guess
to your
that's the kind of
storytelling.
thing that like makes
You,
me I feel like
I
kind of
look
draws
at
me
the
to like
greatest authors
kind of like
in
Tolkien
history,
and like Lewis,
and I've noticed
because
that
it's like this
the greatest authors,
like there's
they
there's
tended
battles
to
going
suffer
on, there's wars and
as
conflict,
well as
but like
live
it's like
life.
it's like there's like heroes that
Just
have
live
like
life in
honor and
general,
like fight,
whether it was something
like they
big or
fight
not,
against some like
before
bad
they
guy. Maybe
contributed
they
their
die,
fiction.
but they like you know like
The best
they go out
example I
with
can
some
think of
kind of
is
like
Fyodor
bravery
Fyodor
or
Dostoevsky.
also like valiance and stuff like that.
He suffered big time. Like he was trying to like fight against like these oppressive governmental forces before the communism took over. And he got himself into trouble. He noticed the effects of this regime in his book, like Notes from the Underground, and his persecution got to the point where he found himself rather traumatized when he found himself victim of a false execution, and the sheer suffering he went through has deeply influenced all of his fictional writings, which he's very deeply orthodox in his faith, and he's got such a profound
definitely like this.
psychological
Yeah, you're
insight into
very
the human
knowledgeable. You know a
condition.
lot of
You'll
stuff.
find it in his
I
books like
I
The
didn't even
Brothers
know some of this stuff.
Karamazov,
I've never heard
Crime
it
and
before.
Punishment, brilliant read. Demons, Idiot, all these brilliant books that he wrote are celebrated books. It all came from a man who profoundly suffered. Now, I'm not saying that you need to like deliberately like whip yourself in your bathtub or something in order to get the fiction that you want. It's just that it's a common pattern I've noticed, right? It's just that it's people who have that authentic life experience tend to make the best kind of stories. And when you compare that to a lot of people like today, like for example,
I guess one other thing I'll bring up. I don't know how we don't have to talk forever.
Rings of Power show.
So I guess I've been working on like building like my own little RPG world with like building the world and the stories and the characters.
They have not
so like
gone
stuff like settings and all that kind of stuff.
I'm trying to think about all this stuff like experience as Tolkien had.
Just like maybe
Tolkien
like
was an actual soldier.
Kind of like kick some kind of like inspiration. And sometimes you feel like you kind of like it gets kind of dry when you're like making stuff.
Who made Rings of Power
stuff like this,
like they haven't
kind of gets it
dealt with
flowing a little
anything
bit more.
more dangerous than picking up a Wii remote or something. I mean, that's what they look like. That's their beta energy that they're like emanating. I guess just trying to figure out like what do I really want to do with it, or like why and all these types of questions. It's not just that show, of course. It's a wide variety. Like also like what again like I'm thinking about the future a little bit. Like if I build this little like into the story and hopes the world can just bend to their will. Game, which I have a couple players in right now. Like there's different kinds of storytellers that are also. I guess like a lot of these these little questions come up like but for terrible storytellers, I guess like the way they portray their suffering. What is like my purpose for? What kind of story or message am I trying to tell? Without any form how much control do I like really put into the story? Whereas all these little great storytellers see their storytelling as a way of reconciling with what happened, like negotiating what happened, trying to make sense of what happened, and basically having a discussion with themselves and their audience about it, and come to a healthy resolution about it. Ideally. Yeah, I'm going to head off fairly soon, but I wonder if we can wrap up this conversation in a particular way.
I've been trying to do more writing, so at some point I wanted to do more writing too. But I haven't really got there fully yet. I'm not like I'm not the greatest writer yet. Like, I'm kind of like in the bottom level, but I do some. I write occasionally. Maybe for myself. It's important to realize that relationships at the center of it all, because it can be easy to get carried away with trying to prove yourself. That's another way Malika's humbled me, actually. She said in a live stream that, no, you're meant to live life first, then the art comes out. I thought I could prove myself with the art, but as it turns out, art comes out more authentically once you've take the time to actually live life. You know, work your job, pay your wages, do your chores at your home, help out your communities, and things like that. Now, some of that can be quite painful because that involves opening up relationally. But you need to open up relationally to certain amounts of people in order to find healing, in order to find people who can resemble home, and have something quite constructive. In fact, tidying up your house can be a very constructive thing. In fact, a tidy space indicates a tidy state of mind. There's a reason why people like Jordan Peterson insist clean your room, and that'll help you sort your life out. Because who are you to sort out other people's lives out if you can't even sort out your own life? Oh yeah, it's in the Bible as well. Yeah. I've been listening to. Sorry. Yeah. Right. How can you see the speck in your brother's eye if you don't remove the log in your own eye? Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. Directly from Christ himself. Well, when you say Okay, yeah,
in regards
I've heard you talk about her
healing
before.
up,
I think I
highly
talked to her
recommend
once,
listening
but
to Mark De Jesus, because he's got a
or
lot
maybe it
of
was that, yeah.
relational based
So when you
stuff
say
that's been crucial for
when you say you have
my
to
own
like let
healing
the
journey.
world building or the story
I've
go,
also been
what do you
reading
mean by that?
the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, who managed to
Oh, so like,
describe
what do you? Okay,
the
so
journey of faith,
what? How
the
is like
existential horror
what did you try? What do you
of
mean by that? Like,
that
so
comes with
like once you
this
kind of make it to the
lifelong
public, is like you
despair,
no longer have like control over it,
followed
kind of to an
by
extent. Is that what you mean?
taking a leap of faith. The kind of faith that in which you have to let go of your own capacity for reasoning. Like I remember thinking at first, that sounds absurd. I base my reality on objective evidence. How can you base your reality on subjective experience? That's not what Kierkegaard is saying. Kierkegaard is not saying you let go of reason altogether. He's saying that there's a limit to our own capacity to reason. That's where we must take the leap. Um, so I suppose that leap also helps with giving storytelling a try, because I remember seeing this clip from John Cleese where he said publicly, the greatest
Okay,
obstacle
I see what
of
you're saying now. Yeah, that's
creativity
also
is the
really
fear of
interesting.
failure. John
Yeah,
Cleese said, if you approach
but I guess it's kind of like
creativity with
eventually
the
kind of. I
mindset
think it's like
of
the
let's
goal
give
of
it a
why
go
you
and
want to
see
do
what
it, anyways.
happens, then
But
you're
it's
less
also
prone
very
to
humbling, very
worrying
humbling.
about whether it's going to fail or not. If it doesn't quite work, you'll say, okay, let's pick up the pieces and try again somewhere else. It's very insightful,
I
actually.
feel like it's something I try to like maybe
So
like I
I suppose
mentally
to
kind of
wrap up
prepare
this
myself sometimes. Is
conversation,
like I try to let
I
go of
would
like
say,
the outcome, like
well,
control over the outcome, and
to
like
put it bluntly,
kind of like
if you're going
realize
to be
I
a
can't
creative
control
artist
like the
person,
universe and
you need to
everything.
know
And
how
like
to tell a good story.
I hate it, right?
Yeah,
I hate it. I hate it.
it
But I
kind of
know it.
goes without saying,
It's
because
true.
if you're gonna have a story that's logically incoherent, even from world building, and keeps contradicting itself logically and thematically, and as well as contains like narcissistic ideas of like rules for thee but not for me, and stuff like that, then it's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Oh, it's frightening. Yeah.
But if you actually
It's
take the
sometimes
time
it actually
to
to work. Sometimes it works out good too.
understand
Actually succeeds. That's also kind of a
consistency
terrifying
and
thought. But
spiritual subject matter
like I make a
in
YouTube video
storytelling,
and it might
as well
actually
as
work, right?
carefully
And
doing
people
your
might actually like it.
research on certain
It's
things
hard to, sometimes
before
to understand.
applying it to whatever kind of story you want to tell.
Because I think we tell ourselves, oh,
And
it's not gonna
you
fail or it's
learn,
not that great.
there's
It might pop off.
plenty
You
of
need to add
advice
something
online and in
unexpected.
books and whatnot on what makes for a compelling story, compelling different kinds of scenes, dialogue, ways of showcasing thematics through different mediums of like books and films and video games, so on and so forth. Like it's the internet. You'll find something. In fact, hey, you've come across me talking about this for like more than 2 hours. I'm sure you'll find something. Yeah. Welcome to the internet. Have a look around. But essentially, once you learn all that, and if you really are that serious about applying it to give something meaningful to the public, then make it beautiful, make it count, and make it meaningful for people, and make it real. Don't I suppose in regards to how you present yourself as an author, don't make yourself out as something that you're not, and just do your best to guide people to the infinite virtues that will stand the test of time, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and get people out of the darkness and into the light. I think that's a good way to wrap up this conversation, right? Yeah. Yeah. What can I say? I've done my research, for better or for worse.
Jonah was quite upset with
And
God
part of it's
because
from
he
life
was showing
experience
mercy.
as well as taking the time to research this kind of topic matter, because this is the kind of topic matter I'm interested in case you couldn't tell. Glad to share it. Glad to share it. I'm glad it's getting out there. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 The two paths. Sorry, could you repeat that again for a moment? Sorry. All right. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I suppose, to be honest, like even the people who take the road of suffering, they're gonna struggle with that because they're gonna face several urges and several things that's gonna get them out of their comfort zone. And a lot of people, and I've experienced this myself, are gonna like the moment we come across anything remotely distressing, we just basically flee to comfort, which at first it seems to resolve the issue immediately, but it doesn't solve the situation. If anything, it's just going to make it worse. Um, so it could be a trick in that regard. Although all of us have our different strengths and our different weaknesses. Like some people will be able to tolerate physical pain more than others. Other people can handle chronic stress more than others. Some people can handle different kind of situations more than others. Some people can handle like stage fright, others can't. Um, some people can handle handling raw meats, others can't. Some people will be allergic to this, others won't. We'll all have our different strengths and our different weaknesses. So obviously, on the roads of suffering, there might be a part of us that says, "Yeah, we're tough. We'll make it through this." But that's what you're good at. Of course, you're gonna breeze through that. No. Actual growth comes from facing what you're afraid of and what's actually challenging you. So you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow, and uh, many of us would like the easy path. I know I would, but something about suffering makes us learn profound lessons in a rather profound way, more so than what it would have been if it were just simply the easy option. Because I suppose that if it were the easy option, you take the lesson for granted at certain points. But if there's suffering involved, you're going to learn the lesson in a rather deeper kind of way. Maybe it could have been designed that, it could have played out somewhat differently, in which we could just get it and just move on with our lives. But this is a broken, conflicted world we're living in, so we have to rise up to the challenge to be strong enough to help people out with what we had to face and how we can help others through that. So we'd like the path of comfort, wouldn't we? We'd like that. We would all like that. We would all like life to just be simple. We'd all like relationships to go well. We'd all like things to not suck. We'd all like like jobs to be fair on us, for relationships to go well, for there not to be so much division between different people, just happy-go-lucky stuff. We don't prefer that. Sadly, that's just not the world we're living in. But what we can do, at the very least, is rise above it and be strong enough to confront the problems and uproot them from the inside out. So we prefer the way of comfort, but I think we both know that the brutal answer is like we need the suffering, and we need the uncertainty. We need these moments to help us to grow, to make us stronger, and it can be very scary at times.
I got plenty of time.
Even like the habit of like trying to write something new, like or some new pattern in life. You're gonna have to train your brain to get adjusted to a new pattern in life. You're gonna have to do it. I could make elaborate stuff about it, but yeah, just, like in the words of Shia LaBeouf, just do it.